A few showers, even the odd thunderstorm. So high pressure clings on. Many places fine as we go through the evening, but the first sign of that change across the northwest of Scotland. Showery rain turning up, pushing into Northern Ireland during the early hours, heading into the central belt, as well as the south of Scotland by the end of the night. England and Wales, though, stays clear, stays dry and stays warm in many places overnight. A few colder spots where we've got some shelter, but actually for many it is going to be a relatively uncomfortable, muggy night. We start off Thursday with the showery rain across much of Scotland, hit and miss downpours, the potential for some heavy downpours across the south of Scotland and into Northern Ireland as the morning progresses. At the start of the day, that's still to reach England and Wales, and so we start things off here with plenty of sunny skies and temperatures very quickly rising. We're going to reach the mid to high 20s by the middle of the afternoon across a large part of the south and central UK. But for Scotland and Northern Ireland, it's a very different story. As a weather front moves south, it will bring a thickening of the cloud, and it will reach parts of the far north of England and southern Scotland by mid-afternoon, with the risk of thunderstorms along that. Cooler air arrives into the rest of Scotland and Northern Ireland, a marked drop in temperatures compared with recent days, but further south, mid to high 20s. Top temperature 29 Celsius. Could spark a thunderstorm or two in the south, but that's all cleared through by Friday. And Friday is still a very warm day in the south and southeast, plenty of sunshine. The rest of the country, however, will see the temperatures drop as cooler air arrives from the northwest. We've got that cooler air in place for the bank holiday weekend, but still plenty of fine weather.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers. Sponsors of weather on GB News.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good evening. This is the latest AI travel news from gbnews.com. Currently, in the Wakefield area, there is an accident on the M62 eastbound with one lane of 3 closed between Junction 6 and Junction 7, with conditions expected to normalise by 7:30 this evening. In Suffolk, all lanes are closed on the A14 westbound from Junction 50 Stowmarket East to Junction 49 Stowmarket West due to an incident, aiming for resolution by 9 o'clock this evening. The Kent roads face minor delays on the A20 eastbound between the M20 and the A260, with one of 2 lanes closed, expecting normal flow by 7:30. Stay up to date at gbnews.com for more travel news.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Courtesy of Marquis Leisure, you could be driving away with this brand new Elnag Baron 560 motorhome. It comfortably sleeps 4, comes with sky roof, integrated kitchen and bathroom, and is worth over £67,000. And that's not all, as we'll also give you a further £5,000 in tax-free cash to make sure that wherever this motorhome takes you, it takes you there in style. For another chance to win the lot, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB13 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 6th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions, but every Friday night at 9 p.m. you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A very good evening to you. Welcome to GBN Tonight with me, Tom Harwood. Now, blackouts brought Spain to a standstill this week. Is green energy to blame, and could it happen here? And with even Tony Blair joining in the net zero backlash, is it time for the government to change course?
I feel very vindicated. You will know that I have been talking about net zero not having a plan since 2019.
Vindicated. That's how Kemi Badenoch feels as Sir Tony Blair slams government's net zero policy during her interview with our political editor, Christopher Hope, earlier. Also,
I am beginning to wonder whether I'm afraid of what a national inquiry will uncover.
Keir Starmer afraid of a national inquiry into grooming gangs, claims the Tory leader. And
spoke to Reform UK leader Nigel Farage today. He told us that the Tories won't exist by the time of the next general election. What is your response to that?
He wishes.
Well, that was her takedown of Nigel Farage's pledge to end the Conservative Party. What do you make of it? And tonight, the firearms officer who was cleared of killing gangster Chris Carber to protect his colleagues will now face a misconduct hearing, meaning despite legal exoneration, he could still now lose his job. Well, there's a huge amount to cover tonight, not least of all, of course, our interview with the Conservative Party leader ahead of tomorrow's elections. Well, I, of course, want to hear your thoughts on all the topics we cover tonight. Do get in touch. gbnews.com/your say is the way to get involved throughout the programme. But until all of that, let's get an update on those latest headlines with Katie Bowen.
Tom, thank you and good evening. The top stories at 7:02. His Majesty the King has reflected on his experiences with cancer as he hosts representatives from community-based cancer organisations and initiatives at Buckingham Palace this evening. The King, alongside Queen Camilla, has thanked those who support cancer patients and their loved ones, praising the profound impact of human connection offered by those working in care. His Majesty said that each new cancer diagnosis will be a daunting and at times frightening experience for those individuals and for their loved ones. To the US, where President Donald Trump has blamed former President Joe Biden for the fall in America's GDP, and he's also said that he hopes for a trade deal with China during a cabinet meeting after the US economy shrank by 0.3% in the first quarter of this year. Writing on Truth Social, the president urged everyone to be patient when it comes to his economic policy, saying that the 0.3% contraction in the economy had nothing to do with his tariffs. The president added that he wants every country to do well, but that they must treat the US fairly. Speaking in that cabinet meeting this afternoon, the president also invited tech billionaire Elon Musk to stay in his administration for as long as he wants. The officer cleared of murder after fatally shooting Chris Carber will face a gross misconduct hearing following a review by the police watchdog. Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp says he's deeply disappointed by the IOPC's decision. A firearms officer shot Mr Carber in the head after he tried to ram his way out of a police vehicle stop in Streatham in September 2022. Mr Carber was not armed and the officer was charged with murder and went on trial in October last year but was cleared after just 3 hours. A helicopter and 6 police cars were involved in stopping the 24-year-old after the Audi he was driving had been linked to a shooting outside a school in Brixton the night before. He died in hospital in the early hours of the next day. Conservative Party leader Kemi Badenoch questioned whether Sir Keir Starmer was dragging his heels on local inquiries into grooming gangs because he doesn't want Labour's cover-ups exposed. Ms Badenoch once again called for a national inquiry into the issue of Prime Minister's questions today. Just yesterday, Reform UK committed to launching a national statutory public inquiry into the scandal in its first month of government. Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner spoke to reporters earlier.
Well, look, we've had a significant number of inquiries into child sexual exploitation under the previous government, and they did nothing with those recommendations. When I spoke to survivors, they said, we need to get on, we know what some of these challenges are, we need to get on and implement them, and that's what the Prime Minister said today. We've also set aside £5 million to make sure that they can have local inquiries, and we've also urged the police to make sure that if people come forward, even with historic claims of child abuse, that they must be taken seriously and investigated, and we've been strengthening the powers around that to make sure that that happens.
Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now let's go back to Tom in Westminster.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good evening, welcome to GBN Tonight with me, Tom Harwood. Now, the start of this week plunged Spain, Portugal and parts of France into darkness. The trains stopped, traffic lights went off, people found their daily lives frozen, realising just how much we rely on a stable supply of energy. Experts say the ability of Spain's grid to manage energy anomalies has declined markedly with the greater degree of renewable energy sources in the energy mix. Now, solar energy accounted for 59% of Spain's electricity at the time of the blackout, with a further 12% coming from wind. Did these less reliable forms of power plunge the country into darkness? Well, today, Tony Blair has raised the alarm on our precarious path to net zero, with a new report saying that Britain must change course to a more pragmatic policy. He said phasing out fossil fuels in the short term is doomed to fail. But what should we do? And what really happened on the Iberian Peninsula this week? Well, I'm very pleased to be joined now in the studio by the independent energy consultant, Catherine Porter. Catherine, thanks for being with us. In layman's terms, what on earth happened in Spain and Portugal?
OK, so there was some sort of a fault, and we've not been told yet what the origin of that fault was. It's pretty certain that the grid operator knows, but they haven't made that public. And then they were unable to recover that fault, and so we had a cascading grid failure that covered, as you said, all of Iberia and part of France.
So normally, I suppose, across energy networks in many countries around the world, we have little faults all the time, I suppose. But it's about how we deal with these faults that changes things. And particularly, perhaps the over-reliance on renewable sources made it harder to deal with those faults.
Yes, that's right. Our power grids use alternating current, and wind and solar, they produce direct current, and that has to be converted to alternating current using electronics. So we're basically trying to introduce a form of electricity onto the grid that the grids were never designed to accommodate. So and the more of that you have, the less stable the grid becomes. So you remember in 2019, we had lightning strike the network here in Britain, and there was a blackout that covered about a third of the country on the east side of the country, and it lasted maybe 20 minutes, half an hour. The reason that didn't cascade to a nationwide blackout was because we have more of what we call inertia. So this is a strength property that resists the impact of these faults. But when you have more renewables, you lose that quality, and that's what we saw in Spain. They couldn't react to that fault. They didn't have the tools to do it, and therefore the whole thing just cascaded and it all went out.
And the inertia that we're talking about is, I suppose, coal and gas-fired power stations, not really coal-fired power stations in the UK anymore, but gas, even nuclear, driving these enormous turbines, these steel sort of 20-metre wide behemoths that just continue to roll even if the power stops, so there's still some generation happening.
Well, so what these big turbines do is they generate the alternating current in the first place, and the alternating bit of the alternating current is a cycle, basically. So your voltage and your current varies with time in a hopefully stable way. And because these machines are big and heavy, they resist changes to their speed of movement, and it's the speed of movement that creates the cycle. So if you start replacing these with wind and solar, not only do they not create your lovely cycle to begin with, if the cycle gets disrupted, they tend to disconnect themselves. They don't participate in in supporting it. And so the whole grid just becomes much less strong.
And this is fascinating because France, which relies much more on nuclear power, which still does have these, I mean, it's the same sort of turbine that is in a gas-fired power station, just uranium is heating it up rather than gas. But France, because it had this inertia in its system, was able to deal with the anomaly in a far better way than Spain.
Yes, exactly. So it only affected a very small part of France. You didn't get a cascade throughout the whole country, and they were able to fix it very quickly. And the trouble is, once you had in Iberia the whole blackout everywhere, you're then in a scenario where you have to do a full black start. And that's extremely technically challenging to do, because now you have to only have your conventional generators because they've got to set up that alternating current again. And a lot of power stations use the grid to get going. So obviously now you have to have power stations that have their own backup diesel generators to get them running. And then you've got to make sure that all those nice waves that you have of the current and voltage have to be synchronised.
But
otherwise they cancel each other out.
This is incredibly worrying if we're going to move to a world of renewable energy. Because even if we build enough capacity or enough overcapacity to account for the energy demand that we need from these intermittent sources of power, even if we do that, these sorts of faults and blackouts could become far, far more regular. I mean, how can we is there a way to avoid them when relying on just technologies like wind and like solar?
No, I mean, you can't, at the moment, the technologies don't exist to allow you to completely remove conventional generation from the grid. You can try and support the grid with things like synchronous condensers and flywheels, which are basically big rotating machines that don't generate electricity, but you sort of plug them in and they provide a drag, if you like. And then you've got new types of electronics which will potentially change the way that those direct current sources, wind and solar, inject their electricity into the grid. But those technologies are called grid-forming power electronics. They're still in their infancy. And Australia has been doing quite a lot of work on this because they have lots of solar.
Yeah.
And it's not been going very quickly. It's been, I think the progress has been disappointing. So we're some way away from being able to do without conventional generation.
This all ties into Tony Blair's warning from overnight last night into today's report, because if we are really going to go hell for leather on being the Saudi Arabia of wind power, if we're going to have solar panels on every roof and across many farm fields across this country, the government's plan for nuclear power is not going to make up the closing down of potentially gas-fired power stations any time soon. Is the idea of clean power in any short order at all going to be possible?
No. No, absolutely not. And we have two problems. We have an energy problem and we have a grid strength problem. So the energy problem is that we actually are running out of capacity. We're running out of power stations on the grid. And this is really why we've seen the subsidies be extended for biomass, despite the controversy around that. We're also likely to see further extensions of the old nuclear reactors. But there's a limit to how far that can go.
Just lastly, does the government know this? Because the government seems to say everything's fine. This is all rosy. We're on course for clean power by 2030. Are they lying to us?
Well, it's hard to know why they're saying these things, because almost everybody in the market is... And even NESO, if you really read what they say, they're by no means saying that it's possible. They say, oh, it's technically possible if all of these really unlikely things line up. But the government just isn't listening.
Well, Catherine Porter, Independent Energy Consultants, it's been an absolutely fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for explaining all of that in the detail and with the knowledge that you have. Well, goodness me, so much more to cover today on GBN Tonight. Up next, our political editor, Christopher Hope, spoke to the Conservative Party leader, Kemi Badenoch, when she admitted that the local elections tomorrow will be a very difficult time for her party. That after this break.
No matter the state it's in, this is our nation. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for a genuine, honest discussion on where we have been, where we are going, and where we are with the people who set the direction. That's State of the Nation every Monday and Tuesday at 8 o'clock, only on GB News, the People's Channel.
GB News Breakfast. every day from 6 a.m.
You two met, I mean, since we last saw each other, then you two have done Strictly. And, but the fact that and there's quite an age gap.
51 years.
51. And yet...
I was granny.
But the fact you clearly get on really well and you've stayed in touch and you've developed a real friendship.
We really do. I mean, we live 5 minutes from each other. We speak most days, and Angela had this amazing campaign with Let's Dance, and obviously I was very, very much supporting that. And when you just get on like a house on fire, we just do. We get each other. We have great banter. And like you said, there's 51 years between us, but we feel like we've known each other for 51 years.
You have a particular interest in getting dance back into schools, don't you? I mean, your own experience of this, because your dad is a professional footballer, and you actually won a place, didn't you, into the football academy? It was sort of expected that you were going to be a footballer.
Yes, it was. I was expected to be a football player naturally because I was the eldest son, and Southampton wanted to sign me in the Premier League, and they still are. No, I chose to be a dancer, and it was because my dad and mum sent me to dance classes because I was very hyperactive as a kid. I was pretending to kick a football all the time. They sent me to my next door neighbour's dance school, and the class was called Tango Tots. I somehow ended up being a dancer and had to tell my Geordie dad when I was 12 years old that I wanted to be a dancer.
How did that go down?
It went fine. It's not like the film, not like the film, but it's very, 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 very supportive. And obviously the brother ended up being the football.
But you're very keen to get dance back into schools, aren't you? Tell me why.
I'm so keen because for kids that can't afford it, why not just give them the opportunity to learn to dance? We live in a world today where we're on the phones, we're on TikTok. Kids are learning to dance anyway, so why not regulate it and let them learn it in school for free?
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, welcome back to GBN Tonight with me, Tom Harwood. Now, over the last few weeks, we've spoken to the Prime Minister. Yesterday, the leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey, and today, the leader of the Reform Party, Nigel Farage. But now, our political editor, Christopher Hope, brings you the leader of the opposition, Kemi Badenoch.
Kemi Badenoch, thank you for joining us on GBN Tonight. The polls suggest your party is heading for a drubbing this week. Is that your fault?
What we are seeing is a very challenging time for Conservatives. The last time we fought these seats, we were riding on a poll high during the vaccine bounce. We won 2/3 of the seats that we stood in. That's unprecedented. No party has ever done that before. So, of course, we know that there will be a correction. Last year, we also had our most historic election defeat. It's going to take time to come back from that. But I was elected to renew the Conservative Party. That doesn't happen in a matter of weeks or months. We've got a long road ahead, but the work has already started. We are rebuilding trust with the public.
What does a good result look like for you on Friday?
We are fighting for every single seat. We know that it'll be challenging in some counties, but at the end of the day, Conservative councils deliver better services for lower taxes. So I'm not playing guess the number. We don't want to talk about numbers. We want to talk about what our offer to the public is, because it's not just about winning. What are we winning for? And it's who's going to fix the roads, who's going to look after adult social care, children's social care.
Are you facing a crisis in your leadership this weekend as a result of these forecast results? Will you step aside if someone else can do a better job?
I think it's completely ludicrous to be talking about changing another leader just 6 months in. 4 years ago, Keir Starmer had a terrible local election result, and look where he is today. Local elections are not an opinion poll. They are about who's going to run the very best services. Right now, what we're seeing is that protest parties are doing well because people are unhappy with the Labour government. Unemployment is up, growth has halved, and we need to talk about where our economy is going with Labour.
In PMQs today, Keir Starmer made a joke about Robert Jenrick running. Is it time that he put up or shut up about whether he wants to replace you as leader?
No, that is not what is going on. I do think that was a very funny joke by Keir Starmer. It's nice to see that once in a while he's got a sense of humour. Most of the time he doesn't. But I appointed Rob to be Shadow Justice Secretary. He is doing a great job. He's holding two-tier care to his feet to the fire on justice. I want him to keep doing that.
We spoke to Reform UK leader Nigel Farage today. He told us that the Tories won't exist by the time of the next general election. What is your response to that?
He wishes. The Conservative Party is the longest existing democratic party in the history of democracy. We have a great history. We've had ups and downs, but that doesn't mean that we are out. And what I'm doing is making sure that the Conservative Party does more than just survive, that it thrives. And that is what we're working on, fighting for every single vote and rebuilding trust with the public.
At Prime Minister's Questions on Wednesday today, you called on Sir Keir Starmer to order a national public inquiry into the rape gang scandal, I think 3 times. He didn't say he would do one, did he? Why not?
I am beginning to wonder whether he's afraid of what a national inquiry will uncover. In January, he promised 5 local inquiries, not good enough, but he said we'll have 5. As of today, it's 4 months in, nothing has happened. And you can't expect local councils to investigate themselves. You can't compel witnesses, people aren't giving evidence under oath. We need a full national inquiry. Even Labour politicians like Andy Burnham and Harriet Harman have said, let's have a national inquiry. But do you know who really wants a national inquiry? The victims, and that's who I'm speaking for.
And they've told you that?
Yes, they have, many times.
Should the BBC show coverage of the Irish rap band Kneecap at the Glastonbury Festival?
No, they should not. And this band should not be playing at Glastonbury. What it needs is to be prosecuted. And you'll remember, Chris, I refused money to this band. And when Labour came in, they gave them that money. That's the difference between Labour and Conservatives. Labour won't fight for our values. They won't fight for this country. They give money to people who are anti-British, who talk down the UK, who promote Hezbollah and Hamas, and actually ask people to kill MPs. I think that's disgusting. They should be prosecuted.
How does it feel to have Tony Blair, the former Labour Prime Minister, supporting your policy broadly on net zero?
I feel very vindicated. You will know that I have been talking about net zero, not having a plan since 2019. So I'm glad that, 6 years in, Tony Blair, a former Labour leader, is beginning to see that I was right. Let's hope that other party leaders start following.
You said earlier this week that the pensions triple lock, a vital thing for so many GB News viewers and listeners, is safe as of now. Why have you raised the prospect of ending that triple lock just days before such important elections?
The Conservative policy has always been to maintain the triple lock. It's our policy, but we're not in government now. And we need to make sure that while we have all the commitments to maintain the triple lock, that we also look at what is happening to the economy. So people don't need to worry. This is other people setting hairs running, not me.
So you won't commit now to having that as a policy at the next election?
We have always said that we are committed to the triple lock. At the next election, we're going to come out with all of the policies that we've worked out. Who knows, we might change everything, make things better, improve things. We don't know where that will be until our policy commission's report.
And just finally, Kemi Badenoch, is it right that the Met police officer who was cleared of murder after shooting Chris Cabba will face a gross misconduct hearing?
No, it is not right. The courts have exonerated him, and that should be the end of the matter. Armed police officers have a very difficult job to do, and we should not act as if an armed police officer is somebody who's just working at a reception desk who decides to get a gun out. I think this is completely wrong. They do a very tough job, and they're making decisions, within nanoseconds, decisions that will save people's lives. I think it is incredibly disappointing that the IOPC has ruled this way, and Conservatives fully back our police officers. We need to make sure that they're free to do a really difficult job and are not continually hampered by this harassment that we're seeing from those people who don't want the police to be armed or to actually police this country.
Kemi Badenoch, thank you for joining us today on GBN Tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, there we have it. Kemi Badenoch, the 4th in our series of leadership interviews. I, of course, want to hear your thoughts on that interview with the leader of the Conservative Party. Do get in touch. gbnews.com/your say is the way to get involved. But I'm very pleased now to be joined by the former Labour MP, Khalid Mahmood. Khalid, what do you make of what Kemi Badenoch had to say there? First, let's start on that tricky question of net zero. She feels vindicated that Tony Blair has said what he has.
Look, I think what Tony Blair said is actually interesting, and I think we should look at it. We as a nation hold a very small percentage of carbon release. What we've got to do, and our policies got to change to look at the whole international sphere. When you've got China, when you've got India, when you've got the US, you've got some of the Eastern European states, and including Russia, still burning coal and putting it out in the atmosphere. We can't hold an umbrella over our head. What we've got to do is to have a sensible policy which allows us to produce steel, and the energy costs are astronomical. We're going to create an industry to allow that to happen as well. And I think what we've done is we've taken a fine microscope on us as the UK and ignored everybody else outside. What we need to do is pressurize and in some instances support them financially to do this. Otherwise, just us trying to think that we can do this by holding an umbrella over our head is not going to work. And I've always said, I think we need to have a rational policy which deals with that.
Do you think the government is living up to that sort of policy at the moment?
Well, look, I think Ed Miliband is somebody I've had a huge amount of time for. I've worked with him. But I think on this policy, he needs to look at the international arena, just continuously looking at the UK, getting our people, particularly working people, those in very difficult positions, to be able to use their vehicles, to be able to get to work and back in all sorts of weathers. These people can't work from home. These people in industry and other areas have to actually go to their place of work. And some instances, very unsociable hours, so they can't use public transport. And so we're going to look at not putting more burdens on them. And so what we've got to do is relook at those policies and see how we can support them, but look at the overall international response to climate change.
OK, now an interesting point of contention we heard in that interview was that of pensions. Kemi Badenoch saying, of course, that the Conservative Party introduced the triple lock on pensions, which is true, but also saying that she's not going to commit to a fully fledged pensions policy this far out of the next general election. It was an interesting thing for her to say, because, of course, it does open the Conservative Party leader up, I suppose, to political attacks on the issue.
Well, absolutely. And I think, again, she's showing a weakness. The pensioners, we've confirmed the fact that we'll keep the triple lock. I think Labour Party will keep the triple lock. We need to keep that in order to support those people who've supported us in the past. They've paid their taxes, they've worked hard, and it's time for us to support them. And I will always support that, and I'm ensure, by the best of my ability, the party supports that as well.
Pensioners do feel very aggrieved, however, that the Labour government, one of the first things it did was to strip away the winter fuel allowance, which, of course, was not in the Labour Party manifesto. Many pensioners feel incredibly betrayed over this particular policy decision from the Chancellor.
Well, you're right in what happened, but the fact is that's a consequence of a £20 billion black hole left by the Conservatives. And I certainly hope that the Chancellor really looks at that at the earliest opportunity, when the economy starts to take off a little bit, to ensure that we replace that back again. The pensions, of course, are going to be increasing by £400, which is a good thing, and we want to do that. But also, I still want the Chancellor to revisit that, perhaps in the next budget.
Of course, the OBR did not seem to guarantee that £22 billion black hole figure. They said that that was somewhat of a political creation. But I do want to just get on to another point with you before we run out of time, which is, of course, the idea that the police officer who the Old Bailey found to have lawfully killed the gangster Chris Kaba is now going to be put through the ringer of an employment proceedings event due to the fact that some members of ethnic minority communities feel aggrieved at the killing. Kemi Badenoch said that that's not right. What do you think on this particularly contentious issue?
Well, look, this is a very, very contentious issue. It's a very difficult issue for people to deal with. But look, we've got to get a handle on these quasi-organisations who tend to go above the law and make their own minds up. What we've got to do, once the judicial process has taken place, that's it. It's over. And I think this officer deserves a break, because these people work under very, very difficult positions. Just imagine if that person in that car was able to then cause more injury or perhaps worse. to other offices that were available. It's a very difficult split-second call. It's gone to the judiciary. That's been done. That's it, the end of the matter.
It is so strange when, again and again, politician after politician, yourself, the leader of the opposition, many people in the House of Commons say that this is an extraordinary state of affairs, that this should not be happening, and yet this quango, not controlled by any democratically elected politicians, has been able to run away with this and 3 years after the event still put this officer's employment under question. I mean, it does seem that our elected politicians have simply lost control of processes that perhaps they used to be control of.
Well, I quite agree that I think the Labour Party has taken NHS England out. That puts direct responsibility on the ministers and the politicians who are dealing with this. I think we need to do the same here. You had the Justicing Sentence Guidelines Board, who again tried to do something without taking heed of what the government says. These people have placed themselves above the elected people who should run the country and above the law as well in some instances. They believe they can do what they want to. I think the high time for people in politics to say, we're here to take that responsibility. We need to do that, and you will listen. You can present your reports, but you listen at the end of the day what the will of Parliament and the politicians is.
Although if I had a penny for every Prime Minister who promised a bonfire of the quangos, I think I'd have at least a dozen pennies by now. Khalid Mahmood, that's all we have time for, but thanks indeed for joining us on GBN Tonight.
Thank you.
Well, you're still with me, Tom Harwood. This is GBN Tonight. But after the show, of course, this evening at 9 p.m. is Patrick Christie's Tonight. And the star of that show, Patrick Christie's, the one and only, joins us now. Patrick, what's coming up?
Yeah, Tom, great show. Thank you very, very much. Loads on tonight. So, who would serve Britain now? There appears to be a witch hunt going on. Armed police officers, soldiers being hauled to court for historic prosecutions. We have got prison officers desperate for things like stab vests, which they're not getting. I think there's a big problem going on there. And Keir Starmer, he couldn't name where these 4 mythical grooming gang inquiries are going to take place across the country. He fudged it when it came to Farage calling the Channel crossings a national emergency. Was it Starmer's worst ever PMQs? Rumours tonight of Ed Miliband getting the sack. Britain is apparently the 3rd most miserable country in the world, but I've got a theory on this. We're going to be talking to a psychologist on it. I think that poor political leadership is making us all depressed. And one high street cosmetics store stands accused of trying to indoctrinate kids by slipping pro-trans leaflets into children's party bags. So I'm going to be talking all about that, and of course a first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages as well. So there we go.
Sounds absolutely jam-packed, Patrick. Can't wait to see it. But of course, that's at 9. Now, coming up on this programme, the firearms officer who was cleared of killing gangster Chris Carber to protect his colleagues now faces that misconduct hearing we were talking about. And he could still lose his job. What impact could this have on recruiting and retaining those so necessary armed officers?
Westminster, the ultimate clique. And you're fighting like rats in a sack. But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask. OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician. Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off-limits. You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless. But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show. Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
No,
Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The royal family is an enduring symbol of tradition, unity and pride for Britain. At GB News, we celebrate what makes this country great. In our new royal newsletter series, you can join me, Cameron Walker, for Inside the Palace, an exclusive look every week that takes you beyond the gates and brings you the very latest from those at the heart of the monarchy. Never miss a royal moment again. Sign up now. Go to gbnews.com/royal newsletter and get the latest straight to your inbox.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Dordme, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point.
He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
A very good evening and welcome back to GBN Tonight. Now at 35 minutes past 7, a bunch of you have been getting in touch, particularly over that interview that our political editor Christopher Hope conducted with the leader of the opposition. Mike has got in touch to say, for the first time, I have to agree with Kemi. This Labour government is the most unpatriotic ever. Tom has got in touch to say, and Tom, thanks for getting in touch. It's a great name that you have. It appears that it's not just Keir Starmer that U-turns. Kemi Badenoch was elected on a Tory manifesto commitment for net stupid zero in 2019. That is true, although it seems about every single party was standing in 2019 on that commitment, despite the fact that no MPs got to vote on it in Parliament. It was passed by acclamation. Kemi does say, however, that she was one of only a handful of MPs to question it, despite not being able to have that vote. Robert has been in touch to say it's all well and good for the likes of Kemi and Keir to say they'll put the world to rights, but we the people want action, not words. Anyone who believes a word a politician says need their heads examined. And I have to say that, Robert, on this one, perhaps you speak for just about everyone tonight. It does seem that politicians have been saying one thing and doing another since time immemorial. But welcome back to GBN Tonight with me, Tom Harwood. Now, the armed Met Police officer who was cleared of murdering the gangster Chris Kaba is now facing a gross misconduct hearing and could lose his job. Well, the officer, who was part of a specialist firearms unit, shot Kaba in September 2022 after Kaba drove at police in an attempt to break through a roadblock. Well, he was unanimously found not guilty by a jury, but nearly 2 years later, he's now facing potential dismissal from the force. Now, of course, this raises questions. Who will want to do this high-risk role with no extra pay, that is, carrying firearms, if they face the prospect of being prosecuted or disciplined even after being cleared in court by a jury of their peers? Well, joining now to discuss this is Norman Brennan, a former London police officer and director of the Law and Order Foundation. Norman, this is a stunning story to me. The fact that this man who carried out the most difficult role in the line of duty is being put through the ringer years after the event.
Yes, you're absolutely right, and good evening, Tom. Let me tell you straight off. I'm dealing with a number of Metropolitan Police officers and some others around the country that, for doing their job, stop and search, doing what the public want, challenging offenders, have found themselves under disciplinary investigation from the Independent Office of Police Conduct and are suspended forever. One officer, about a year ago, got in his car and went to commit suicide. 2 or 3 other officers at this moment in time considered committing suicide. So let me just tell you the pressures on firearms officers. They're outstanding. Men and women volunteer to carry a firearm, something most can't and won't. We have the highest trained firearms officers in the world. No other country can touch them. Very, very occasionally, they will need to use their firearm. They will discharge it. It's not something they want to do. Sometimes it's something they have to do. I could spend half an hour, Tom, telling you about Chris Caber, but in a very brief resume, since he was 13 years of age, he had a penchant for carrying knives and guns, for shooting people, for stabbing people. And just a few days before he was shot dead by the firearms officers in Streatham, he attempted to murder with his 67 gang, one of the most notorious gangs in Britain, let alone London, tried to murder somebody. They all ran away. Fortunately, he wasn't killed. The night before these firearms officers were called to Chris Caber, he was in a vehicle seen leaving the scene of another shooting. Who was the shooter? Most probably Chris Caber. So bringing us right up to date, the Met firearms officers knew nothing